Welcome to Chapter 2, Values and Attitudes. Think about values. Think about how often values help shape the relationships within our lives. I propose that we cannot carry on a serious relationship with another person or a group of people unless we share a number of values. Now, we don't have to share all values, but there has to be some agreement among the important values. If there is not that agreement, we may have a relationship at a distance, but it won't be a close relationship. Or we may have a short-term relationship, but not a long-term relationship. Now, you may be able to think of an exception to this, and if so, I'd like to have you share it, perhaps in the discussion forum. But this statement does seem to reflect most strong relationships in our lives. Obviously, values are deeply held perspectives that form the basis of our belief system. They involve ideals such as honesty and frugality and charity, etc. It's not, I don't like sweet potato fries and my granddaughter does, so we have different values. Liking sweet potato fries isn't a deeply held perspective. Values are deep, not shallow. And my granddaughter is obviously much younger than I am, but we still actually share a great deal of values. So values may even transcend generation and other factors in our relationships. That also doesn't mean that we can't live with one another having vastly different values, but it is difficult to carry on a relationship that leads to mutually viable outcomes. Do you and your spouse have to have compatible values to make a marriage work? Do you need to have compatible values with your employer to be productive? Do you and your best friend have compatible values? Not the same values, but compatible values. Probably so. We can argue that congruent values create cooperative behavior and contrasting values create conflict. Cooperative behavior may not lead every time to positive outcomes. There are a lot of other factors involved, but they certainly are more likely to do so than conflicting relationships. Clearly, values are critical to successful business outcomes. Values are long-term entities. They change slowly, and they change with some pain. But during my lifetime, I can honestly say I have seen major changes in values, and I've even experienced some of those changes myself. For example, I believe that men and women are vastly different. We're not the same, but we are equal. We're equal at home, at work, in government, and in all arenas. Now, we're not the same, but we are equal. Now, I'm not sure I always believed that. I never believed that women were second-class citizens, but I'm not sure I always believed they were fully equal. I do now, and I find those values confirmed every day. But that value change didn't come overnight. It was slow, but it was effective. Our society seems to be reevaluating our value system constantly, and that's okay, but we do need strong values in place. It gives us something to hold on to. They form a base from which we can grow and achieve success. The fact that values change slowly is a good thing. The fact that values change at all is also a good thing. But if we throw our values aside daily and merely react to situations, well, that's called wandering. And wandering doesn't lead to success. It just leads to more wandering and ultimately to chaos. Organizations must be driven by strong values. Organizations don't wander well. But once again, all organizations don't have the same value systems. Some highly value profit. Some highly value customer service. Some highly value stakeholders. Now, I don't know which is the most important set of values, but I do know that organizations, just like we as people, must strongly value many different things at the same time. And balancing those values properly is critical to success. You see, I don't want to work for an organization that values only profit. But I also don't want to work for an organization that does not value profit. I don't want to hurt anyone in my private life. But I won't hesitate to hurt someone who is threatening my family. Those are conflicting values, and they must be balanced. So what are your values? What's important to you? Have you always achieved a balance of those values? Let's see what the authors have to say about values. Chapter 2, Values and Attitudes. In Chapter 1, we discussed ethics. What's right and wrong? What's acceptable and unacceptable? We may have thought that right and wrong were pretty clear cut, but as we discovered, that is not always the case. Ethics and right and wrong present significant ethical dilemmas. Sometimes actions are both right and wrong. And we saw that ethics are a clear limiting factor, and a good one, on how we manipulate behavior to affect outcomes in organizations. Values also impact behavior both as individuals and in organizations. What do you value? It's probably somewhat different than what I value, but there will always be commonalities, I'm sure. You see, values color the way we see the world. Values come from our culture, friends, parents, spouse, and any number of other sources that help shape our value system. As indicated in the text, values are motivational. Values influence how we think and, perhaps more importantly, how we behave. Values are generational in that our experiences help form our values, and our experiences are vastly different from one generation to another. You know, my parents lived during the Great Depression and experienced severe economic hardship and scarcity. A few years ago, my wife and I were spending a few days with my parents. They live in another state. And while preparing to go to bed, I was admiring a handsome wooden medicine cabinet in the bathroom made by hand by my dad. During my inspection, I opened the medicine cabinet and inside found a dozen large bottles of Aqua Velva, if you remember that, shave lotion, and an equal number of large tubes of toothpaste. I asked my mom why they had so much toothpaste and shaving lotion, and she explained two reasons. One, you don't want to run out, and second, you never know when they will be scarce. Now that may make sense except for the amount of toothpaste on hand. 12 giant tubes of toothpaste, and they only had one set of teeth between them. They were obviously hoarding toothpaste and shaving lotion. They also hoarded toilet paper and napkins and any number of other things they used on a regular basis. Their value system, formed in their early years during the Great Depression, called for preparing for the worst and never running out of what you need. That value drove their hoarding behavior beyond all logic. Now that may be humorous, but my parents were not unusual. Many people who lived during those difficult times did the same thing. It was normal behavior for them growing out of a value of preparedness. Values motivate behavior. The power of values and the impact on behavior can be seen in Schwartz's value theory as explained in the text. Spend some time on that concept. The values defined in the model can predict behavior and therefore can provide much to our understanding of the value systems. We understand that we all hold values personally, but organizations have values as well. Often organizations openly state and advertise their values. They state these values whether they actually hold them or not, much like we do as individuals. I may proudly state that I am open to different opinions and that I value diverse ideas. Actually, I may only value and want to hear opinions like mine and discourage different views. Now, this is merely an example. I do value and want to hear your divergent views in this class. Organizations often state one set of values but hold very different values. An organization may state that they value families and employees should make time for family away from work. They may state such, but actually require employees to work 60 hours plus per week to be considered a good employee eligible for promotion. I have worked for many such an organization in the past. So how do you know what the actual values are of an organization or of an individual? Well, behavior depicts the real values. How do I react or behave when I encounter ideas and concepts that are different than mine? That behavior will detail my actual value system. How does an organization react to an employee who doesn't work weekends and only works 40 hours per week? The behavior of the organization will depict its value system. So values motivate behaviors, but behaviors also validate the value statements of the individual or the workplace. I went to work for an organization that espoused family values. While proudly promoting a workplace steeped in family values, the daily language was foul and vulgar. Sexual harassment was rampant. Pornographic pictures were on display in restrooms and other areas of the facility. Drugs were in use and sold. There were other clues that the environment wasn't exactly family oriented. Management decided that we would change the environment into the family atmosphere that we advertised. We set about reiterating our value system and told employees and others that past behavior would no longer be tolerated. We instituted a zero tolerance policy for drugs and sexual harassment, and we implemented that policy. Many people were reprimanded and many were fired, but eventually we cleaned up the work environment so it matched our proud proclamations. Our values matched our behavior. And I carried that value system with me into other work environments and always ensured that the work environment closely followed our stated values. You see, I value consistency and honesty. Values are relatively consistent over time, although they do change some. But they normally don't change drastically and as such help further define our attitudes both personal and in the workplace. And our attitudes impact our behavior at work. If we feel we are working for an organization that reflects our personal values, we will likely have a positive attitude about work and work behavior. If we do not work for such a place, we will either have a negative attitude or experience cognitive dissonance or both. Cognitive dissonance is not uncommon on a personal level. It is a discomfort that takes place when our behavior is in conflict with our values. It is a discomfort I have felt many times. Let me give you an example. I love my family. My children are grown now, but when they were little, I loved them and felt a strong need to be a good parent. I felt a strong need to spend quality time with them and set a good example. I'm also somewhat of a workaholic and feel a strong need to spend a great deal of time on work activities. When I spent long hours at work, I felt guilty about neglecting my family. And when I spent time with my family, I felt I was neglecting my professional responsibilities. Cognitive dissonance was abundant. The text states that there are three ways to reduce cognitive dissonance. One is to belittle the importance of inconsistent behavior. For example, when I was spending large amounts of time at work to the detriment of my family, I rationalized that the kids won't miss me and they're too young to know anyway. Or I may say this is just one dance recital or one music recital and not a very important one at that, so I could afford to miss it. My cognitive dissonance is reduced. Second, I may find consonant elements that outweigh dissonant ones. I may state that my activities at work are important to all the employees and families to help them achieve a stable family life, and my family is stable enough to do without me for a while. Therefore, I'm making a much better contribution at work for the good of all than if I were at home with my family. I've once again reduced my cognitive dissonance. Third, I can change my attitude and behavior. And this is what I actually did. I coached softball and basketball so I could spend quality time with my kids in a family environment. I made sure I attended other events and had some time at home on a consistent basis. I told everyone at work that for certain family events, such as ball practice and ball games, I would leave the office early and nothing would interfere with those events. To my surprise, everyone accepted that initiative readily and were very cooperative. It was not unusual for someone to come into my office and state they wanted to meet late afternoon and then follow up with, "This isn't a ball game day, is it? If it is, we can move the meeting to another day." I changed my behavior to reduce my cognitive dissonance. I felt I was allotting time and energy to my family, but also not shortchanging my profession. And you know what other positive aspect came out of it? I, as a leader in the organization, was providing an example that matched the expressed family value approach of the organization. Now, I'm sure you've also felt cognitive dissonance as well and have attempted to reduce it using one of the three methods. Keep in mind that often the best method is to actually change behavior and meet multiple priorities consistently. Cognitive dissonance is common, normal, and occurs more than we may think. Recognition of cognitive dissonance and conscious resolution can yield very positive behaviors for the individual and for the organization. The text then dives into a discussion of organizational commitment and psychological contract. I believe these are two very important concepts in terms of manipulating behavior in the organization. Organizational commitment is a function of the individual values matching or being congruent with the organizational values. It is a measure of how likely is the individual to exhibit behavior that enhances organization goals and drive to reach organizational objectives. If everyone has high commitment, then the organization will likely make great strides towards achieving organizational goals. If commitment is low, the organization is in trouble. If an organization highly values customer service and hires individuals who also highly value customer service, then you will likely find excellent customer service in that organization. If outstanding customer service is preached and rewarded, then the customer will be king and the competitive advantage will emerge. If the organization highly values customer service but hires people dedicated to personal promotion and individual advancement, customer service may be less than optimal. If this same organization values profit above customer service and will sacrifice customer satisfaction to save a dollar, but hires employees who highly value customer service over the dollar, then cognitive dissonance on the part of the employee will emerge and customer service and the dollar will suffer. As you can see, hiring employees who share the actual values of the organization is critical to success. And perhaps the other side of this coin is POS, or perceived organizational support. If organizational commitment defines the extent to which the individual supports and commits to an organizational goal, then POS defines the extent to which the organization commits to the employees, or at least the perception of that commitment. Obviously, if there's true congruence between the employee's commitment and the organization's commitment to the employee, good things can happen. This holds true in all organizations. Professional sports teams, hospitals, churches, schools, airlines, armies, and on will be impacted positively or negatively based on organizational commitment. Are you committed to this university? Do you perceive that UNCG is committed to you? If so, your chances of meeting your personal goals are greatly enhanced, and the university's chances of reaching organizational goals are likewise enhanced. The second concept, psychological contract, is also important to achieving organizational success. The text defines psychological contract as, quote, an individual's perception about the terms and conditions of a reciprocal exchange between him or herself and another party, end quote. In this case, the other party is the organization. And the key to this definition is the perception of the terms and conditions. It's not a formal contract. It is, for the most part, unwritten, although some would argue that handbooks and policies detail the psychological contract. In general, if the perceived psychological contract is being met, employee commitment is high. If not, commitment is low. We all have psychological contracts with many organizations. We have them as employees, customers, members, etc. It is based on our expectations, which are developed by what we are told by the organization, what we hear about the organization, and what the organization advertises, and what we are led to expect from other similar organizations. I propose that you have a psychological contract with this school. That contract is based on the expectations that you develop based on many inputs described above. How's the school doing? If they meet your expectations, you are more likely to stay in attendance and complete your degree. If not, you are likely to find another institution that will better meet your expectations. Not only are you likely to stay if the psychological contract is met, you are likely to refer other people to the school and also support their goals with work and donations in the future. You will become an active and contributing alumni. As you can see, the psychological contract is a very important concept in impacting behavior that leads to organizational goal attainment. Also, as discussed in the text, fulfilling the psychological contract will lead to employee engagement that has obvious importance to organizational success. I mentioned earlier that the psychological contract is developed at least partially on expectations. I also briefly discussed some of the inputs that help create those expectations. However, another major contributor to developing those expectations are needs. You feel you have a need for a degree to enhance your chosen career. Once those needs are recognized, you try to find an organization that will help you meet those needs and develop expectations around that. Meeting those expectations and fulfilling those needs are powerful motivators for behavior. Before we finish this chapter, I would like to make one point on expectations. And this point also applies to some of the other factors impacting individual and organizational behavior. The text mentions factors such as expectations and psychological contract, and they are important considerations. But we must recognize that employees may come to our organization with expectations derived from various sources discussed above. However, those expectations and the psychological contract itself is not etched in stone. They are changeable. They can be moved. Organizational leaders must continuously strive to understand the expectations of employees and other stakeholders, and if those expectations are incorrect or unrealistic, leaders must take steps to clarify and change the expectations held by employees. These factors are not finite entities to which leaders must react. Leaders have input and must take actions to ensure congruence between employee expectations and realistic deliverables by the organization. Let me give you an example. I worked for a manufacturing organization that valued product quality among other factors. Our product was made of wood, which creates many different quality problems not experienced in other industries. Wood swells and shrinks and dents and scratches, and therefore there are many causes of defects. We were having severe quality problems in our end product, which meant that many defects were probably being observed by employees, but no one was taking action to stop the product from being processed into the end product. We had meetings with all employees and emphasized that quality was valued, and if they saw a defective component, they should stop the production line and fix that problem before restarting the line and continuing production. All understood the problem, and all employees agreed to take appropriate action. We reiterated that anyone was empowered to stop the production line for a quality defect. We went back to work and experienced the same quality problems as before. The line was never stopped. Leadership was baffled. These were good employees who seemed to care about their workplace, yet they continued to take no action. Further investigation revealed that employees really believed that quality was good, but meeting production numbers was what we really valued, and those numbers must be met at all costs. Therefore, no one was willing to stop the line. The expectation was that whoever stopped the line would be reprimanded at best and fired at worst. We were shocked. We thought we had clearly communicated the expectations. Clearly, the expectations of employees were incorrect and needed to be changed. But asking employees to stop the production line when a defect was observed was just too risky for them. So we put a small table on the production line with a rotating blue light, kind of like a beacon, on the table that everyone could see. We asked employees to switch on the light when they observed a defect, and a supervisor would immediately turn off the production line and investigate the quality issue. As a result, the blue light was turned on constantly, and our quality problem was solved in a very short time. Employees were more than willing to turn on a blue light when observing quality issues, but were not willing to shut down the production line. Their opinion, which was unexpressed, was, "I'll turn off the line after someone else does it and survives." Now, this is a simple example of perceived values, expectations, and other concepts discussed in this chapter. But the important point is that one shouldn't make assumptions about employee expectations, and also an organization does not have to live with those expectations. Expectations can and should be changed to create congruence between expectations of employees and the organization. Employees understood after the blue light event that we really did value quality over quantity of production, and soon the blue light was no longer needed. The production line could be shut down by anyone. Including a low-risk alternative actually changed expectations and perceptions. This chapter contains a good discussion about various factors such as values and attitudes impact on organizational behavior. Congruence between individual values and organization values create positive work attitudes and contributes to positive outcomes. Lack of congruence between individual and organizational values creates problems and interferes with positive outcomes. These factors should be monitored, reinforced, and changed as necessary to create congruence between the organization and those who behave in the organization. Positive outcomes are created, not merely accepted.